There is a text that was read by the community that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls, quoted directly in the New Testament and preserved in its entirety by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church for over 2,000 years. It was left off the canon list issued at the Council of Laodicea in 363 A.D., with no surviving record of any theological objection to its content. And it contains, in specific and sequential detail, a description of what happens to a soul in the first moments after death, including who comes to meet it, what it is shown, and where it is taken. The description does not read like theology, it reads like testimony. Enoch is taken, while alive, to the place where the dead are held. He is shown the interior. He describes compartments, separate chambers within the same space, each with different qualities of light, each containing souls in different states. He names the angel who oversees the place and identifies the function that angel performs. He describes the souls as fully aware. He describes a boundary between compartments that cannot be crossed by the souls within them. In 2001, cardiologist Pim van Lommel published a study in the Lancet, one of the oldest and most respected medical journals in the world, documenting near-death experiences in 344 consecutive cardiac arrest survivors. 62 of them reported conscious experience from the period when their hearts had stopped, and the experiences they reported contained the elements that have since become famous across thousands of documented cases: awareness continuing after the heart stops, being met by a figure, the review of a life, a boundary the experiencer understands cannot be crossed without permanence. The landmarks in the medical literature are the landmarks in the Book of Enoch. The researchers had no reason to compare their findings to a text that had been out of the biblical canon for 1,600 years, so no one did. Here is what 1 Enoch chapter 22 says in the translation prepared by R.H. Charles from the Ethiopian manuscripts. "And thence I went to another place, and he showed me in the west another great and high mountain and of hard rock, and there were 4 hollow places in it, deep and wide and very smooth. How smooth are the hollow places and deep and dark to look at. Then Raphael answered one of the holy angels who was with me and said unto me, These hollow places have been created for this very purpose, that the spirits of the souls of the dead should assemble therein, yea, that all the souls of the children of men should assemble here, and these places have been made to receive them till the day of their judgment, and till their appointed period, till the great judgment comes upon them. 4 compartments, different qualities, a temporary holding state, not the final destination, an angelic figure as guide, the souls aware of their situation. This is not a poetic description of heaven. It is an architectural description of a specific place, given by someone who claims to have been shown it directly, preserved in a manuscript tradition that the Western Church's canon left behind, and that was unknown to the modern West until 1773, when the Scottish explorer James Bruce brought 3 Ethiopian manuscripts to Europe, and scholars realized that a text quoted in the New Testament and later found among the Dead Sea Scrolls had been continuously read in Ethiopia, while the rest of Christendom had forgotten it existed. I'm Dr. James Mercer. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. What I'm about to walk you through has been in those Ethiopian manuscripts for 2,000 years, and it has never been formally set beside the modern medical literature it so strangely resembles. Let's go back to the beginning. To understand what the Book of Enoch actually is, you need to understand how it disappeared, and because the disappearance is not what most people assume. The Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish religious text attributed to Enoch, identified in Genesis as the 7th generation from Adam, the great-grandfather of Noah, the man who walked with God and was not, for God took him. Genesis devotes 3 verses to Enoch, and then he is gone. The Book of Enoch purports to be what Enoch was shown during the experience Genesis describes in those 3 verses, what he saw when he was taken. The text is composite, assembled from earlier sources between approximately 300 BC and 100 BC. It circulates as 5 books within one collection: the Book of the Watchers, the Parables, the Book of the Luminaries, the Book of Dreams, Psalms, and the Epistle of Enoch. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered at Qumran beginning in 1947, contained fragments of every book except the parables in Aramaic, meaning the text was read and copied by the Qumran community 2,000 years ago. The New Testament quotes it directly. The Epistle of Jude, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone. That passage appears in 1 Enoch 1:9. The author of Jude was citing Enoch as the words of a prophet. The New Testament treats 1 Enoch as a text worth quoting as scripture. Then, in 363 A.D., the Council of Laodicea issued a list of canonical books, and the Book of Enoch was not on it. No record survives of any debate about it. The decision is documented, the reasoning is not. The text ceased to circulate in Western Christianity, and within a few generations it was forgotten, surviving only as unnamed echoes in texts that no longer said where the echo came from. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which received Christianity in the 4th century and formed its canon independently of the Roman process, kept one Enoch as canonical scripture. They call it Enoch. They copied it in Ge'ez, their liturgical language, and preserved it in the monastery libraries of the Ethiopian highlands for 14 centuries, while the rest of the Christian world did not know it existed. And what the text says about death is not a side detail. It is one of the primary subjects of the collection. The scholarly response to 1 Enoch, since its rediscovery, has been historical and theological. What sources did the author draw from? How does it relate to other Second Temple literature? How did it influence early Christianity? What does its exclusion tell us about how the canon formed? These are legitimate questions. They are also questions that treat 1 Enoch as a document about the history of religion, never as a document that might be describing something. The alternative framework did not exist until medicine accidentally built it. Raymond Moody's 1975 book, Life After Life, was the first systematic compilation of near-death experiences from medical survivors. Pim van Lommel's 2001 Lancet study was the first large prospective clinical study of the phenomenon. 344 consecutive cardiac arrest patients, tracked from the moment of resuscitation, 18% reporting conscious experience from the window when their hearts had stopped. Sam Parnia's AWARE study, published in the journal Resuscitation in 2014, examined cardiac arrests across multiple hospitals and includes a documented case of a patient reporting specific perceptions from the period of his arrest, details of events in the room that were verified by the medical team and that the patient had no ordinary sensory access to. The NDE literature is now substantial, and it is not fringe. The Lancet, Resuscitation, decades of documented cases across cultures and religious backgrounds. Its recurring elements are stable enough that they have names: the awareness of being dead, the meeting, the life review, the border. The researchers who built this literature were not scholars of Second Temple Judaism. The text that most closely maps their findings had been out of their civilization's canon for 1,600 years. The comparison between the two bodies of writing, the ancient witness and the modern charts, has never appeared in a peer-reviewed venue. When you make it, the correspondence is not vague, it is specific. Set 1 Enoch beside the NDE literature, and 5 landmarks appear in both, not thematic echoes, specific structural features, and they arrive in the same broad arc: awareness first, then the meeting, then the review, then the structure, then the boundary. Awareness does not end. The NDE accounts consistently describe experience continuing after cardiac arrest, often described as clearer than ordinary waking consciousness. 1 Enoch describes the souls in the hollow places as fully aware, capable of communication, retaining memory, knowing where they are. The ancient text and the modern accounts agree on the first and strangest point: death changes consciousness. It does not switch it off. Someone meets you. Across the literature, Moody's compilations, Van Lommel's cohort, the decades of cases since the experiencer is met. Sometimes the figure is a deceased relative. Often it is described as a being of light, a presence, a guide. 1 Enoch names the figure Raphael, listed in chapter 20 as the angel set over the spirits of men. The dead in this text have an assigned custodian, and Enoch meets him and is shown the place by him, exactly the role the modern accounts describe without ever naming it. The life is reviewed. The panoramic life review is the most famous element of the NDE, the whole of a life seen at once, often from both one's own eyes and the eyes of those one affected. 1 Enoch never uses the phrase. It does not need to. In the text, the souls arrive with their lives fully present, and their placement among the hollow places reflects what those lives contained. The review is not an event in Enoch. It is the sorting principle of the entire architecture. The space is structured. Chapter 22 is specific. Separate hollows, different light, different populations, one place but not one condition. NDE experiencers who describe being shown beyond the boundary describe the same property. Not a fog, not a void, a differentiated landscape with regions and qualities. The details vary by witness. The structure does not. The boundary. In nearly every account where the experiencer returns, there is a border, a river, a gate, a line, a threshold, and an understanding, communicated or simply known, that crossing it is permanent. In 1 Enoch, the compartments are bounded. The souls do not traverse them on their own. In both literatures, the border is structural. It is not a choice. 5 landmarks, the same ark, 2 bodies of testimony, 2,000 years apart, that were never supposed to meet. Look closer, and 3 further details emerge. The first revelation. The figure is described by function, and the functions match. 1 Enoch does not describe Raphael's appearance. It states his role, the angel over the spirits of men, and his name itself means God heals. Ask the NDE literature how the meeting figures experienced, and the answers converge on the same 2 qualities, being known completely and being healed rather than judged. The ancient text gives the job title. The modern patients describe the job being done. The second revelation, Ethiopia is not a footnote, it is the archive. The tradition that preserved 1 Enoch is the same tradition, discussed before on this channel, that preserved layer after layer of early scripture that the Roman canon process set aside. The Ethiopian canon is, functionally, a snapshot of the early Christian library before the pruning. 1 Enoch is not the only text in that library that speaks of the dead in terms the NDE literature would recognize. It is simply the most detailed, the one that reads least like doctrine and most like a site report. The third revelation. The early church trusted this text. The later institutions set it aside. Jude's citation means the community that wrote the New Testament had 1 Enoch in hand and quoted it as prophecy. The council that omitted it came 3 centuries later. Whatever the reasoning was, and none survives, the practical effect is beyond dispute. The most detailed first-person account of the geography of death in the Judeo-Christian tradition spent 16 centuries outside the tradition's own view. A church whose authority included the interpretation of death set aside the one text claiming to have surveyed the territory. Perhaps for good reasons. The reasons were not written down, and the Book of Enoch does not stand alone. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, in use from roughly 1550 BC, describes the soul met by a guide, its deeds weighed in review, and its assignment determined by the outcome. Guide, review, assignment. 1,000 years before Enoch was compiled, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, drawing on Indian Buddhist roots, describes luminous figures encountered in sequence, the life just lived reviewed, and a structured intermediate state between death and what follows. The Indic stream that produced it also gave the Vedic account. The soul met by Yama, Lord of the Dead, deeds reviewed, realm assigned. 3 independent streams, Egyptian, Indic, Enochic, with no documented borrowing between them at the time of composition. The same arc, the meeting, the review, the structured intermediate place. And then the 4th stream, which settles the question of literary borrowing entirely, the modern one. The NDE literature is produced by cardiac arrest survivors, overwhelmingly people who never read the Bardo Thodol, never heard of the hollow places, could not name the ferryman's price. They did not inherit the story. They report it anyway. You can argue, and serious scholars do, that culture shapes what the dying mind renders, that a Christian sees angels where a Buddhist sees Buddhas. The details do vary, and I will not pretend they don't. What does not vary is the arc. The awareness, the meeting, the review, the structure, the border, the costumes change. The theater does not. Here is what the omission of 363 A.D. produced and what maintains it now. 1,600 years in which the most detailed ancient account of the post-death sequence was unavailable to the civilization that would eventually build resuscitation medicine. By the time the Dead Sea Scrolls returned Word Enoch to scholarly attention, discovered in 1947, with portions of the scroll corpus not fully public until the 1990s, a delay that generated its own controversies, the NDE literature was growing in a different building entirely, tended by cardiologists who had no reason to walk across campus. The comparison has still not been made in any peer-reviewed venue, not because anyone forbade it, because of something quieter, a category system. Ancient texts are filed as religion. NDE reports are filed as anecdote. And materials in those two drawers are never laid on the same table in the formal record, no matter how precisely their contents align. No committee decided this. That is what makes it durable. A decision could be appealed. A filing system just goes on filing. The category distinction is the suppression. And what would happen if the two files were finally opened side by side is not a mystery. You are looking at it. So here is where this lands. The Book of Enoch describes a post-death sequence, awareness that continues, a named custodian who meets the soul, a life fully present and sorting the soul's place, a structured intermediate space, a boundary that cannot be recrossed. The text was quoted by the New Testament, read at Qumran, preserved complete in Ethiopia, and left off the Western canon list in 363 A.D. without a recorded reason. The modern resuscitation literature, the Lancet Resuscitation, decades of documented cases, reports the same landmarks in the same arc from patients who never read the text. And there is one place where the two accounts seem to disagree until you look at what the dying brain does. The NDE patients describe the life review as vast, hours, days, a lifetime, complete. Enoch treats the review not as an event, but as an instant, the life simply present all at once in the sorting. A contradiction until you factor in the studies of the dying brain published in recent years. EEG recordings capturing, at the moment of cardiac arrest, a final surge of gamma frequency activity, the signature of intense conscious processing compressed into the seconds before the signal fades. If subjective time stretches inside that surge, then what the patient lives as hours, the observer clocks in seconds, and the instant review of the ancient text and the endless review of the modern patient may be the same event, reported from opposite sides of the clock. That is a hypothesis, and I have labeled it as one. But notice what kind of hypothesis it is. One that requires both witnesses, the ancient one and the modern one, to assemble. It has been sitting unassembled for 1,600 years, waiting for someone to put the two files on the same table. The Book of Enoch was left out of the canon in 363 A.D. The reason was never written down. And the text that was left out contains a description of the first minutes after death that 3 generations of cardiac researchers have now, without ever intending to, described, point by point, in the same arc, 2,000 years apart, from opposite sides of the monitor. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church never stopped reading it. The Qumran community read it before Christianity was born. The author of Jude cited it as prophecy, and thousands of patients have come back from Flatline carrying pieces of it without knowing there was a book. What was left out of the canon was not mythology. Whatever it is not that. One more thing, and I mean this. If you have been close, if you or someone you love went through a cardiac arrest and came back with a story, the comments under this video are open, and they are the right place for it. Tell it plainly. Tell what you saw, who met you, what you understood at the border. For most of history, there was no place to put these accounts except a text like Enoch's. Now, there is a comment section, and researchers do read them. That is the only archive this work has ever had, the testimony of the people who went and came back. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. When the next piece goes up, you need to have seen this one first. I'm Dr. James Mercer. The moment I have more, you'll be the first to know.